afternoon, everybody. So I'm Reagon Karki. I'm a bioinformatician, researcher, and data manager at Fraunhofer ITMP. ITMP stands for Institute for Translational Medicine and Pharmacology. I'm joined by my colleague Yojana Gadiya here, and we really appreciate the ELIXIR team to invite us and then give the talk about what we do at our institute. So basically I have divided the whole talk into data interoperability and then knowledge graphs. And the first part is obviously interoperability, and I'll show you with some good examples what's the current state of interoperability and then how these issues can be fixed. And the later part, I introduce you to knowledge graphs, and then there are some projects ongoing in our institute where we use knowledge graphs in drug discovery, and I have a couple of papers that we have published in the past that I want to show you. Right. So to start off, so I want to start with the FAIR principles. I hope all of you are aware of what FAIR is. So basically it's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. So these principles were introduced in 2016, and 6 years down the line, we're still adapting and evolving in the process of verifying our data. So I do not have any statistics and numbers to show how FAIR is our data, but it all comes from our experience that, so most of the focus after 6 years is basically on the first two aspects, which is findability and accessibility. And so this is actually well done in terms of representing the data. So we have different resources like the Zenodo, GitHub, Figshare, or your supplementary files from your published manuscripts where the data is out there. But then the second part is kind of ignored. And then when we have opened the data from these resources, we see the data is unstructured and the quality is poor, and then there's no guideline for other community to how to reuse this kind of data. So this is actually, there are some underlying reasons for that, and that's not so easy to fix it. So one of the reasons for these issues is a lack of use of standard ontologies and controlled vocabulary to represent your entities and represent the metadata. And second is, we definitely need a structured resource or framework to enable these two aspects, and we need certain expertise, and which is also overlooked. And the last one is the list prioritization. That's because most of us do not want to share the data during the run of the project, and the things like, if I'm not sharing the data, why do I need to verify all of my data? So these sort of things lead to unfair data. And so let's talk about interoperability. So I have here listed few of the life science data that we all are familiar with. So whenever we talk about pathways, so we definitely talk about proteins that are involved in those. So whenever we talk about diseases, we talk about pathways, we talk about biomarker, and also some drugs trying to treat the diseases. And similarly, when we talk about clinical studies, there's definitely mention of the diseases and that particular drug being tested, and so on. So here what I want to show is all of these data are somehow interconnected and interrelated. And data interoperability is how well these data can talk to each other, right? So the next slide here, so I want to now show you a few of the issues we have often noticed with interoperability. So I want to take example of the pathways, and so pathways are a series of interaction of proteins and chemicals that have been represented that actually lead to a certain biological phenomenon, right? So talking about pathway databases, so Reactome, KEGG, and Wikipathway are the most widely represented or used pathway databases. And if I show you the overlap of how much of the data is shared between these databases, so this is the entire gene universe. We have all of these pathways, and then this is the overlap of the genes shared between all of these three pathways, and then it also shows that each of these databases have fair share of their own genes that are unique only within them. But the next picture, I think this is even horrible, because if we look at the identical pathways represented in these three databases, the numbers are like really low. And then here what I want to tell you is whenever we end up with our gene expression analysis or some sort of analysis in our institute, so we end up with genes of short list of proteins, right? So first thing we want to do is do some gene set enrichment analysis, and your choice of the pathway on which you do the gene set enrichment analysis is totally going to change your results, right? So this has been solved by a recent paper which is known as COMPATH. So I think this is a better way of solving your, let's say, biasness of gene set enrichment analysis. So next, so we have proteins that are being represented with different identifiers in different databases. And here what I want to show is we have many-to-many relationships. And then if this is not fixed, this is always a problem that this data is not, they are not able to basically talk to each other. So what we actually want is one-to-many relationships, right? So that's how we solve the issue of data interoperability. So now, so what happens when data interoperability is not simply there? So we end up with data silos. So within a given project, there are like a lot of partner institutes, and then it might be the case that all of the data is sitting isolated and not being able to cross-talk with each other. So that's why we need to verify our data and make sure like they're interoperable. So, and one of the few other things why we need to verify our data is, I think when we verify our data, the impact and the visibility of your data is increased, and then people can easily cite your data. And of course, a lot of parallel works are going on. So there's always an opportunity to see where do you stand on the side of results. So that for all of these reasons, so I think verification is really important. And how do we do it? So this is not the exact way to do it. There are other solutions, I guess, but then the FAIRplus project, so they have formulated proper guidelines on how you can verify your data. And then in this aspect, so right now what's happening is there's a FAIR cookbook that is collecting and cataloging experiences from 20 different IMI projects. And my colleague Yojana is an active member of this FAIR cookbook. And then you have all of this is maintained in this GitHub. They are like Jupyter notebooks where you can execute lines of codes, line by line to start verifying your overall data. So this is not just about interoperability, but the entire concept of verification is brought by the FAIRplus project. So now let's move on to knowledge graphs. So introducing knowledge graphs. So these are well-connected nodes with the other nodes, and then very similar to networks, but knowledge graph essentially incorporate the concept of semanticness between the connected nodes. And they were actually introduced way back in 1970 to solve issues like of the conventional databases where you could have concurrent users. That means like multiple users at the same time, and also to tackle issues like representation of data that's not just numbers or characters. So these days we have hyperlinks and images on that are represented as data. So basically knowledge graphs are capable of doing this. And so the other good thing about knowledge graphs is it handles multimodal data types. So right here on my right side, I have a knowledge graph of Alzheimer's disease, which is able to capture information from chemical atomic level up to the organ and tissue level. So this is what few of the good things about knowledge graphs. And then of course the retrieval of data is another aspect with knowledge graphs. So compared to SQL tables or CSV files, the data the retrieval rate of data from knowledge graph is way too fast because there's some underlying algorithm like the shortest path or tree spanning approaches that help you get your data as fast as possible. And the last point, so this is where I want to emphasize is, so knowledge graphs are not just about bringing all of the entities together and representing in a big graph format, but I think they always set the basis for downstream analysis. And then few of my results here today are the applications of knowledge graphs. So before that, I would like to briefly show you what are the different projects that have been using knowledge graph, and we are part of these projects here. So we have got Horizon Europe's BIOMEDICAL. So I think Salva knows it. So we constantly work together. So BIOMEDICAL means it's beyond COVID. So right now we're working with a lot of COVID-19 data, but we're also setting pipelines and workflows to work with other infectious disease that might occur in the near future. And then we have the AMR, where we're understanding the antimicrobial resistance. So this is an IMI funded project. And then we have proxy drugs, which is a German government BMBF funded project that is trying to introduce new class of drugs known as PROTACs. And yeah, so with these PROTACs, we're trying to target those proteins which had been very difficult to target in the past. Okay, so this is a general workflow of how we create knowledge graph. So I think just to save time, I'll just go through it. So we have started, we started accumulating PROTACs from public resources. So these are public databases. And then if you see PROTAC over here, so these can be further listed as individual entities. And this could be like the protein of interest, the E3 ligase, E3 binder, linker, and warhead. And not just this, we have also now started integrating the in-house data or data that's been generated within different sub-projects. And this is really important because we want to see how the internal data maps with the external data. Right, so in this way, so we have been also extending this information with open databases like the Kimball and then Uniprot, and also there's a tool called the ECBD where you can do more structural analysis and all that. So I think I will just skip this slide because this is just a it's a poster presentation that involves the use of knowledge graph that was presented by my colleague last week in Croatia. And what I want to show you here is a paper that was published recently where our colleagues first tried to identify pockets and cavities in 19 of those viral SARS-CoV-2 proteins. And so first, it involves identifying these cavities, pockets with softwares like MOE, and then where docking takes place, and then we do the experimental validation. And then so this is the NMR result, which confirms that these pockets were like really, where these chemicals that have been used were really binding with good affinity. So this is all done on the MPRO, the main protease on SARS-CoV-2, and then this led to the question about, so at this point they do not know any biological activity of this compound. So just binding does not necessarily mean this is going to inhibit that particular protein, right? So what we did as a group of bioinformatics is we asked if are there any bioactive analogs in public databases like the PubChem or Kimball, so that we could also identify the primary target and also the assays that have been tested in the past. And then we actually found for this compound over here, we have a really similar Kimball compound with a really good activity value, and then having a primary target, and then had a good well-known mechanism of action. Okay, so this is my last slide here. So we'll be just a couple of seconds. So here we created a COVID-19 pharmacome a couple of years in 2021, where we want to identify all the mechanisms that were regulated within the scenario of SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. And then using this, so this is a big knowledge graph, and then what we wanted to identify is if we could have combination of drugs that act better against the COVID-19. So we found there were like 45 combinations, and so this is all from the graph analysis of the graph theory. So we identified there could be either synergistic or antagonistic effect of the combination of drugs, and then we took 4 of these drugs that were synergistic in nature, and then we kind of tested this by first infecting CACO2 cells with the virus, and then seeing how good they are in inhibiting the viral effect. And then we found that the remdesivir and thioglutamine, which is the figure B here, is really effective in terms of drug combination, right? So this is, this all, we have done, and we have a really open source of all of our codes and things we do with our Fraunhofer GitHub, and there are a couple of publications that are already been submitted already in bioRxiv. And so this is my group in Fraunhofer, ITMP. We are located in Hamburg, so we are actually in 5 different locations in Germany. And I would like to acknowledge all of my group project partners and then all the projects we have been doing so far. So with that, I would like to end this topic.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all the ELIXIR community for having me. It's a real pleasure being here. I'm going to talk about certified algorithms today, which is kind of the last step in the innovation process. So first you have a breakthrough technology, then you have to put it into a product, and then you have to bring it to market. And in order to bring it to market, it has to be safe. And how do you make something safe? You control it and you have to certify it. So that's why you can only bring certified algorithms to market in the healthcare space. And those algorithms are then mostly medical devices or IVDs, so in vitro diagnostics. And my topic today is whether those algorithms, which are by nature very fluid and changing, if they are actually freezed by these certifications. So what happens when this algorithm comes to market? Can it still change? But first, let's start with a brief introduction of myself and the company I'm working for, which is OpenRegulatory. Unfortunately, our nice logo is a bit a bit wrong at the bottom there, but yeah. So that's us. We're 3 dudes and 1 dudess, so really small company. My colleague Ollie founded the company, and then there's also Sven and Nicoletta, and we're trying to help mostly startups to overcome the challenges with regulations. We do that with different aspects. First of all, we have free templates for regulatory documents. That's, from our view, the most important thing here, because yeah, you have especially those small and middle income companies which struggle a lot with the huge regulations. And there are a gazillion of documents that you have to come up with in order to obtain a certification. And most of the times you don't even know how those documents should look. And there are a lot of templates for those regulatory documents, but they are kept in secret by consultancies, and they sell it to those companies for horrendous prices. And we thought, like, this is not good. Especially smaller companies should be empowered to do the certification on their own and to get at least an idea of what they are dealing with there. So we thought, like, we need to provide free templates for startups and for medical device industry to make this all a little more transparent. And yeah, with that, of course, we don't earn money, but we do earn money with the consulting we then provide along with those templates, because unfortunately they are not self-explanatory. The regulations are so complicated that still the companies need some more advice. But also here our approach is to facilitate that companies can actually then after the consulting deal with all the stuff themselves. It's more like a knowledge transfer. And our knowledge areas are MDR, IVDR, and then some norms and standards, especially for software in the medical device space. And then we also have Formwork, which we're developing, which is a software tool for managing the regulatory documentation in your company. So that's a little side hustle of ours. So software as a medical device, what is it? First of all, I think probably a lot of you know about it because you're all professionals, but I just want to give a brief introduction to that topic. So you can have a software which maybe stores health data or, let's say, X-ray images of mammograms. And just because it's health data, it's not a medical device yet. But when this software that also stores the X-ray images then does a computation on those images, like detecting cancer lesions, then immediately it becomes a medical device because it has the intended purpose of providing some medical benefit. Yeah, and that's where the hustle starts, actually, because then you're in this regulatory field and you have to control everything. Your company needs to get controlled. You need a quality management system, and especially also your software development needs to be controlled. And this is, especially for the smaller companies, very difficult because most of the times they are ambitious software developers or business people who want to be agile and want to bring innovation to market very fast. And then there's this regulatory process that comes in which slows down everything and also binds a lot of resources, which makes it also expensive, actually. So you have medical devices. They actually have risk classes. So depending on the risk, there is class 1, which is the lowest risk. Then there's 2A and B. And there's class 3, which is the like invasive medical devices, implantables, like that, so very high risk. And you also have software as an IVD, which is probably very relevant for some of you. So it's, from the software side, it's the same thing with the regulation and everything, just the classification is a little different. With the IVDR, you have risk classes A to D. And in the lowest risk class here are only like specimen receptacles, laboratory instruments, and buffer solutions. So very low risk. And the definition of those risk classes is actually a struggle for software IVDs because there's almost no way to get into the lowest risk class as a software because this is only for buffer solutions and stuff like that. And software will immediately at least be class B. And this classification is actually important for the documentation that you have to come up with. So the higher the risk class, the more proof you need and the more documentation. So, and then there's also software with AI, which makes it a little more complicated still. And in AI, you have like two different possibilities. You can either have a locked model where you train your AI beforehand and then you deploy it and then it will always do the same thing. And then you have the continuous learning models that take the analyzed data in and incorporate it and constantly improve. And yeah, this is like the holy grail of software AI, but also a nightmare for the regulators because there's something that is constantly changing and you cannot know what it will be doing tomorrow. So that's the two types there are. I will briefly explain you the medical device regulation approach to achieving safety. So the objective of this whole regulation is, of course, providing safety and effectiveness. And safety here is facilitated by explainability, repeatability, clinical data, risk management. I'm not going to read through the whole list. But there are a lot of procedures and documents that need to be created that then lead to a static documentation. So that then certifies the algorithm and kind of locks it in that state because, of course, you need that explainability and stuff, which for AI is also kind of not the case because, of course, you can try to make the AI explainable, but I think not to the degree that the regulators would actually want it. And yeah, then you're confronted with the software reality. like, how do you actually make AI models safe? Yeah, I think we've heard a lot about that already. So you need good data, you need annotation quality, you need to monitor the right metrics, and you need representative data sets. And there are hardly any requirements in the medical device regulation at the moment. We've heard that there's the AI Act upcoming, some Data Act, which will impose just more restraints to the AI industry and makes it even harder for small and middle income, those small companies. Okay, for the sake of time, I need to rush a bit. And then the general software reality, not regarding AI, is that you actually make it safer by providing more updates, frequent patches, automated testing, like usability A/B testing, so you have different versions of the same software. You have an open source community that provides parts of your software, and you have cybersecurity tests. And this is also something that's very fluid, and yeah, you cannot lock that for like update cycles that take 6 months or so. That's just too slow for software. So what you can do is take a hybrid approach. When you have a cloud software, you can actually update more frequently, but you need to comply with the regulations. There's one MDCG guidance, which is actually quite helpful because it has written down the criteria and a decision tree where you can go through. And yeah, this helps a lot by assessing those updates that you do to your software, and you can actually make those updates compliant. Yeah, for AI models, yeah, the approach to be compliant there would be to have a locked model, and you just have a great AI validation document where you have an emphasis on the data set and the annotation structure. So yeah, my time is up. So here are the issues I don't have time today to talk about, which are data privacy, a very important topic in the AI space, then also the tools for actually managing the whole documentation, like our side hustle formwork, and the actual QMS in the companies, which can also be a facilitator of lean and pragmatic innovation. Thanks to all of you, and make sure to check out our website.
Thank you to the organization of this meeting for inviting me to that. I will talk about the European health data space as a game changer in the next future in Europe in innovation and health research. Some of the topics we are talking about have been previously mentioned by Anita, but I think we are not overlapping. We are quite aligned in our different visions from different point of views, from the data providers and data users and regulators and technical solution providers. No? We in Instituto Aragonés de Ciencias de la Salud, the Institute for Health Science in Aragon, here in Spain, we are working mainly in two work packages in the TEDAS Joint Action. TEDAS Joint Action is a project from the European Commission to provide some options to build the legislative proposal for the European health data space. As this legislative proposal has been yet published last May, our work has been changed a little bit because we are not providing solutions or options to be included in the legislative proposals, but to extend some of the aspects that are not quite concrete in the proposals, and to provide some guidelines for the actual implementation of these aspects. So, well, the European health data space is immersed in the European strategy for data that started at 2020. And in this strategy, there's the planning for building a lot of data spaces in different areas. And one of these areas is the health area, the health data space, that is being catalyzed with the COVID-19 pandemic, because the European Commission and the regulatory organism in Europe, the EMA or the ECDC, looked that they were not able to take decisions, or they were to take clinical or medical decisions with data with low quality and late data, and they need to gather information quite just in real time to make correct decisions. And in COVID-19, the situation was changing almost each day, or from 1 week to another, and decisions were really hard to be taken. Obviously, nowadays the technology state of the art permits the creation of health or data spaces cross-border and in large regions. And also we have nowadays the synergies of a lot of research infrastructures, and also the industry, the private sector, and the concept of economy of data that is moving a lot of money in Europe, in all the countries, because they know that data has a high value that is need to be put in movement. We need to know that EHDS, the European Health Data Space, are really two data spaces that are different but related. One for the primary use of data, of health data, in the daily clinical assistance, and the other is the secondary use of data that mainly is gathering, collecting all this data generated in the daily clinical activity to be used for another goals. Okay, and so there are two different technological infrastructures proposed by the European Commission: My Health at EU for the primary use, and the health data at EU for the secondary use. The goal and the intention of the European Commission with this initiative is to create a single market for digital health service, mainly in the primary use, also is impacting secondary use, mainly in primary use, through the certification of electronic health record systems, or guaranteeing the interoperability between electronic health record systems and also between EHR systems and medical devices. In the case of the secondary use of data, the EHDS2, the main goal is to provide a consistent framework for research, for policy making, for regulation, for innovation. And in this scenario, one of the main topics is to give citizens control over their personal health data. Okay? So we need to make all this compatible. The possibility to access all the data, maintaining the right of the citizens to control their data and who is accessing it and using it. Well, there are different user perspectives, but a single health data space to provide solutions to all these different users, these different points of view. From the citizens, they have their needs, the health professionals that need to access relevant health data, and all this is about the primary use data space, and how the health record systems are connected, are interoperable cross-border, and the possibility that one citizen can travel from one country to another and get clinical assistance with all the information accessible in the language of the clinical physician that is attending the patient. In the case of the EHDS2, the secondary use, we need to assist policymakers to guarantee the access to health data for researchers, for innovators, and so on. Well, as I said, after the publishing of the proposal of the ESDS regulation, in TEDA's joint action in this project, we are trying to focus on some aspects that are not so clear in the regulation and need most to deepen in these aspects. As to create, to write some guidelines, or even this will take place to delegated acts from the ESDS when published. One of these aspects is how to create a one-stop shop for requesters in a multi-country landscape. So the intention is that any researcher that needs access data could go to a single point to access this data, even if this data provides from several countries. Okay. Another aspect to focus is the harmonization in the interpretation of GDPR. This has previously commented by Anita. There is a single regulation, but there are different, and nowadays are different interpretations in different countries. In some countries, it's a requirement to have a written informed consent from all the patients. In other countries, for secondary use, when data are pseudonymized or anonymized, there is no need of this consent. Okay? So we need to harmonize these regulations across Europe. One of the aspects also is how to get this one-stop shop in terms of achieving a mutual recognition between all the data access permit authorities in each country. The regulation talks about the existence of one single national contact point and one or more data permit authorities in these points, but we need that if we submit a permit application to one of these authorities, this permit application may be recognized by the rest of the data access bodies. In terms of architecture of the solutions of the ESDS, the proposal is to build a federated architecture based on secure processing environments, with the topic of ask data, don't move the data, and data will remain inside the secure processing environments. You will have all the tools to do your request, to do your analysis, but data should not move from these secure environments. This is the high-level model, and we need to concrete how we are going to build, which technical solutions could lead us to achieve this architectural model. And also, one of the main problems we have is the quality of data. We have said this before in other presentations. And one of the guidelines we are preparing is about a quality framework for health data in the ESDS, so we can label all the data providers to guarantee this quality. So, well, we are working in other aspects as how we can put in the same landscape all the research infrastructures in Europe, all the initiatives like Healthy Cloud, EOSC, BBMRI, or biobanks, or even ELIXIR and 1+ million genomes, and other initiatives, other research infrastructures that can be technical solution providers, or can be users, or can be data providers for this great data space. Okay. And also, one of the problems is how will the private sector fit in this scenario? No? How can we deal with aspects like industrial property or fees that the health data space is looking out for sustainability of the systems, or the cultural suspicion for public sector towards the private sector, and the requirements of transparency in all these aspects. Okay, there are some challenges that we need to tackle with. Legal issues, quality, of course. The secondary use of data has a problem, is that the use is secondary, not primary. Data is gathered by humans, to be interpreted by humans, and we are trying to interpret by computers to do analysis. And also the problem that to build a health data space in Europe, we need to build health data space in each country and maybe in each region when we are a federated country, like Spain, for example. No? We need to build all this infrastructure to be connected to a European health data space. And just my last slide. Identity management is other of the challenge we have, mainly for primary use, but also for secondary use. Citizens' trust is other of the challenge. We have to make this a reality and a useful reality. And of course, patience, because building such a data space is really a huge enterprise. Okay, this is the schema of the HTTS2, and yes, we have an amazing play yard, but it's still at work, and we need to finish the building. Thank you.